Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Nature Folklore Sessions. It's 3rd of April, 2022. And we'll get going. Well, thank you all for joining me for our weekly time of exploring nature-centered folklore, connecting this with your favorite sanctuary space, and expressing inspired visions from your sanctuary through your writing, poetry, art, craft, performance, and even problem solving. Now, today it's the first of our new Permaculture Living series of food sovereignty. And I'll just get some photos lined up and, well, this is me disappearing. This is what it's about. So that's what we got today. But before I start on food sovereignty, I'd like to go back to a matter I included last Sunday when I was talking about riparian buffer zones. And I do try to limit political matters entering into the Nature Folklore show here, as it's not we're not really a platform for that. But this is an Irish matter as well. And the audience, thank you for joining us, is mainly international. So that's a reason not to focus too much on this. But we do have a major concern here. And I brought this up last week. This is what's happening. There's an upcoming application. There's really a request for permission to pollute the Boyne River. And as you know, the Boyne River is the heart, soul, and womb of a large part of the Irish mythology here. And here's a bit of the Boyne there, just for reference. So this is a large part of the Irish mythology and its folklore. And that's why it's come to my attention, and that's why I'm sharing with you today. And so that's a banner they've got up. Now, I'm not going to give a soapbox speech about this, or try not to anyway. I'm going to post a link, savetheboyne.org. In fact, I'll bring a banner up for that right now. I think I've got one. There you go. That's what it is. That's where you get all the information. This is savetheboyne.org, and that'll tell you a lot more than I'm going to talk about just now. There's not much time to actually make the objections. In fact, the objections have got to be in by this coming Wednesday, 6th of April. That's 3 days' time. But only objections from people living in Ireland are the ones that can do the objection. You've got to live in Ireland to make the to file the objection. And if you go to the savetheboyne.org, that actually shows you what to do, where to go. And there's also, we bring up All Is Well. If you go to the All Is Well Facebook group, there's template instructions of how to fill in the application form. But you'll get the links from savetheboyne.org, and that's for all our Irish viewers here. But connecting to this concern, though, is a worldwide movement to get rivers recognized as having the same rights as people. So this is highly connected, and this one here is in Florida. I'm trying to think where it is in Florida. It's up in the northwest, and I've actually been on a rubber tubing down it. But we do this both for spirituality purposes and for being able to make a stronger presence in legal cases and law courts. And that's the purpose of getting rivers recognized with having the same rights as us human beings. There's several countries already have made this move. Perhaps the most famous is New Zealand. And there we go in New Zealand, people paddling down the Whanganui, if I pronounce it right, Whanganui River. That's it. And that's a sort of a look down. It's in the South Island there. So that's already a person, and nobody can pollute it. And if they dare to, it'll come up in the court. And the Indian River Ganges has recently done it. That's how the Ganges was. But now it has rights, and things have greatly improved in the Ganges, and people are using it much cleaner now. It's been cleaned. And that's one of the sort of rituals going on in the Ganges. Also, Ecuador. Ecuador's also moved into the rights of rivers, and they've got theirs into the Constitution. And there's now movement in Ireland as well. This is an Irish river, but the UK is considering this as well. They're campaigning in the UK that the rivers there and lakes have the same human-style rights for rivers like the Boyle over here in Ireland and various others, the Shannon, of course, and Erin, various others will gather. Now, I'm going to talk more about the rights for rivers during the Easter Day edition, and also a lot more during Women and Water in late May. But more to the point, this is an opening to bring the media attention to Save the Boyne.org that's going along there at the bottom there. But before that, it's to tell you that the Nature Folklore Sessions, the videos here, Tree Sanctuary support, are brought to you due to the support of our appreciated subscribers. And also, if I take that away, that's giving you the address there, the Patreon address. Highly appreciated. Thank you, subscribers, because it's your help that allows me to do this broadcast every Sunday, to pay the subscriptions and do the editing and the expenses. We're catching up to that. It'd be nice to have a wee fund for some of our contributors. But thank you, subscribers. Appreciate you. And you're probably watching today or a bit later. So it's time to see who the early birds are that we got here on this lovely sunny day in Ireland. We've got, who we got? This is a new one. Puddle Pipes. Hiya, everyone. I'm watching from Dublin. Interested in Irish mythology and folklore, I always find John's talks really fascinating and inspiring. Well, thanks, Puddle Pipes, whoever you physically are on your birth name, but that's lovely. Thanks very much. Sharon McNichol, morning from Blussenry, Cairngorms. Terry McNichols tuned in from Maryland, USA. And I know Little Wing tuned in very, very early. And my friend Frankie has just dropped me some young tobacco plants and some seeds. And that's the sort of thing, the growing that does go on around the USA, of course. Sherry Murphy's here. Good morning, John, and everyone from beautiful northern coastal Maine. Lovely here today. And finally warming up a wee bit. That's nice. And we still have no buds on the trees. All the land is still brown and gold. Yeah, we're fortunate. Leaves are coming out now, and in the tree labyrinth here, another week or so, and it'll be quite full of leaves. So look forward to you all getting leaves as soon as you can. Have I missed anybody out here? No, I think we got all you lovely early birds that are all in. That's fabulous. Thank you very much. Let's see. Right, let's get on with the show now. Well, it's only me, but I'm going to actually kick off. There's one thing I talked about, Save the Boyne, and there's actually a Save the Boyne video, and I think we'll get right onto that. And within this is there's little short clips included in this short video of the amazing water dancer Lisa Moran, who was live here on Nature Folklore last year, and we were sharing her beautiful poem film, Appear as a Promise. And she's, if you remember that video, and we'll play it again probably with Women and Water, she was doing this beautiful dance underwater as she was reciting the poem on the video. And I only just learned a couple of days ago that Lisa's actually the manager of Powers Court in County Wicklow, which a lot of you have visited, I'm sure, during living in Ireland or visiting Ireland. So get on. This is the Save a Boyne video, and you can find it on YouTube and and Facebook under All Is Well. Do share it as widely as you can, especially up until Wednesday. This is to promote people to get involved on the Wednesday. So this is the Save a Boyne made. So here we go.
Is Misha Bowen. Is Misha míle bhliain de bháisteach, aim se chaite, aim se ráiste. Rugtha sa funte, curtha sa bhuir, análatha ag an grian is mé ag dul sir. I dro cún dé lú, ag cód lú hú, is gamel. Scuilte feag tamil. Timper go sírí ag fína mion san rí I mór scéal ó dovéil. Sníam feag dúran idir dain. Sún is suaite ag ahrú fáin is mise an artere. Don crí mór prabach ag créamh amach ag bethú cách ar mo bhealach.
Red is the rose that in yonder garden grows, and fair is the lily of the valley. Clear is the water that flows from the vine, but my love is fairer than I. Yes, my love is fairer than
Well, that was it. That's the video that's going around, and it may seem to think, why am I starting off the show when it's supposed to be about food sovereignty and permaculture living? I'll actually bring the jigsaw together a bit later on during this program, because the water and the water source is so important to make all this happen. So I'll be coming back to this, and also on Nature Folklore in this series on the 24th of April. Siobhan de Bria, who did the poem, the Irish, the Gaelic poem, she's going to share the entire poem that was used in that, and there'll be a translation. So she'll explain what she's doing as well. And Siobhan would have loved to have been with us today, but I loved her poem so much, and because there's so much on today, and it's a little bit out of the subject, I thought it'd be much better if she could have some real quality space to share this with us as part of this biodiversity series. And that'll be on the 24th. But I play that video because obviously there's an urgency for people living in Ireland to get those applications into County Meath by Wednesday. And the forms are on the savetheboyne.org, or go to All Is Well on Facebook, that group. And there's wonderful instructions of what to say, how to get the form filled and get it in. That's by Wednesday. Anyway, now as I move into food sovereignty today, I actually don't have any more guests. So I hope you don't mind it just being me solo for the rest of this session. But we're back with some wonderful, interesting guests next Sunday. For some reason, everybody that I invited didn't want to be on today. They wanted to be on next Sunday. So we got some great stuff. But food sovereignty seems to have wonderfully come to the fore at the start of the COVID. When the COVID arrived in spring 2020, it seemed a lot of us, we were thrown into this isolation, had to slow down, smell the roses. And I think we looked very closely at our lives. We looked around us and we made changes, didn't we? I'm thinking about over several past decades, people have really been moving in droves from rural settings to urban living. And from urban living, it looks like our lifestyles became far less focused on the land, on land management and gardening. And once you're in an urban area, moved into, the focus suddenly seems to be on, well, I've never lived in the city, so I'm guessing this, but it seems to be focused on positions, earning a bigger salary, and maybe keeping up with consumer trends. And many urban dwellers, they end up not having gardens. They go into apartments or They might get a townhouse with a small little bit of a garden. Most of them don't bother with allotments, and very few people actually work with urban community gardens, which is a bit of a shame. That should be encouraged. But from this, I assume people have become detached from the touch and senses from the soil of the earth. This is the sort of thing, getting your hands dirty. Lost touch with all that. That's what I feel from that. And hands, I suppose the hands-on today is more like hands-on keyboards and touchpads, isn't it? Rather than soil. But, going to the park, they might go to the park. That may be the closest connection that urban people have. But what do they do when they go to the park? They run through it, don't they? They run through it and they put the headphones on. So this is an urban person going back to nature here, holding his device and headphones, all the rest of it, earbuds or whatever he's got. So that's the urban reconnection with nature. And I suppose for a lot of people in urban areas and some rural areas, the whole concept of cooking food, and especially growing food, may seem to be regarded as a waste of time because it's getting in the way of doing other important things, such as, I suppose, running through the park with headphones on to keep fit. Much more important. Anyway, before heading into, I can imagine them. You run through the park, headphones on, head into the cafe for your green falafel smoothie, followed by a coconut milk, decaf, double distilled, amaretto flavored latte. That's the pleasure of life, isn't it? Oh, and I think I've got some. There we go. That's the sort of thing you end up coming out with. And that's before you go meeting with a friend to make some TikTok dance videos. Anyway, food and eating in urban areas, it seems to become about convenience, shopping at the supermarket or going to the cafe, and plus some trendy, fake, healthy coolness like these examples here, which are quite odd. And often the concept of cooking gets reduced to heating food in the microwave or just warming up some of that leftover green falafel smoothie. If that can be warmed up, and if my pictures could come up, warm that up maybe. So those urban habits, they seem to work well, but they're very dependent on what we call food security. And I'm going to talk about that shortly. But for now, going back to ancient times, I'm thinking of the island and the UK here, and maybe much of Europe as well. Let's see, we go back into medieval times, as I often do, and the scribes. There they are, there's a bunch of people scribing. That's when scribing took off. And for those scribes, enable them to be sat in those cubicles and do scribing, they actually needed other people to feed them, shelter them, provide heating, provide their fuel, and even provide the medical services of the time, because they're so busy scribing, they can't do that for themselves anymore. They're not going out to the fields, they've got to do scribing because their abbots or the chieftains are telling them, get in there to do that scribing. And they don't go hunting, hardly hunting. They've stopped building shelters maybe and cutting and chopping wood. So those scribes were getting disconnected from that kind of peasant rural lifestyle. And these scribes, they became an elite class of scholars, priests, teachers, and some of them even made it to being called saints. So to get their precious, profitable and the scribing done, the chieftains and abbots, they would summon some people to do the work and provide the food, shelter, fuel, medical services for all these elite people. I know that's not the correct picture. That's the best that I could do of that way of serving the scribes. But that was their payment for scribing and archiving. So what the scribes got is a payment from other people and their services for their living essentials. And that was a kind of a origin of taxation, I suppose, that it was a form of taxation at the time. But the taxation was people's efforts and resources because they didn't have currency to pay in taxes. That's not much different to today's, today's government art councils do, isn't it? You get into doing your art and the government taxation pays partly for your food and shelter and all the rest of it. So you can sit down in the studio, do your art. Unfortunately, I don't get an arts council. No, I don't get an arts council grant for doing these nature folklore shows. Actually, they're a pain in the butt. I won't go into it, but once you get one of these grants, they think they own what you're creating and they take charge. It can be a real tense situation. Anyway, I suppose in a way, thinking of those scribes is not much different with how we support the people that are now working in places like Google, Facebook, Twitter, Apple, all that type of thing. And I've heard of engineering people in Google and Facebook. They're now earning over 100,000 euros more a year. But if they'd remained in the rural culture and working at growing food, maybe picking a harvest, that annual income wouldn't be 100,000, it'd be more like 20,000 a year. But this causes me to ask, what's the value of income? What's the value on this income? How do we value our income? And how is income valued? You get the 1,000 a year engineer at Google who's actually depending on the 20,000 a year food grower to get food to eat. And even if it is food they pick up as a takeaway, once they came out of the office for a few minutes and order on the phone or online as they do and tap Just Eat or something like that, and they go and pick their take up. It's often pre-made, packed in some way. Yes, the 20,000 year growers who are providing for this, but these growers, they don't really need to go into Google search or use Gmail in order to survive. To rural people, even today, the idea of Google search, etc., they're luxuries. They're fun things to do. But I suppose some people may need to go to YouTube these days and to actually learn how to grow things, even in rural areas, if they can get the internet, that is. And that's because the traditions and crafts and apprenticeships, the rural apprenticeships, they really slipped away. Well, there's a picture to sort of represent this. And I talked about integrating folklore and apprenticeship often. I've done this a fair amount, and I still will continue because the two to me are very connected. And I find it's amazing how folklore and mythological stories are told to explain some of the craft skills of apprenticeship. You really can't get through apprenticeship in the real traditional way without the integration of the folklore and the mythology that provided the vision of the skills from ancient times. And here's some apprentices with some ancient craft skills there. But with farming, fishing and hunting, this also includes things like observing the moon. And I know from living on an island, the tides as well, watching the tides in relation to the moon was a big thing. And that's how you learn your fishing and some of your farming skills as well, by understanding these things. So really your craft is accompanied by the folklore to understand how everything works. Now, one of the challenges I feel that happens with urban living and culture is the changing from community culture into what seems to me to be a greater acquisition motivated culture. So should our culture exist as profits before people, which is what happens when we get into an acquisition culture, or should it be people in their communities be the priority before profits are considered? Now, many people argue that profit is essential in order to look after the people. But a couple of hundred years ago, there was no concept of profit. People didn't understand what profit was about. They lived and survived without it. So that makes me question, how vital is profit? It might be, you say, well, it's essential these days. But to stride away from politics, it does seem that more people have become more inspired during the COVID time of the last couple of years. And this has been something they haven't thought it out in the way I've just explained it. But I think this is what's hit them. What really values, especially people who would get in the car and they'd be stuck in traffic jams all the way to the office. They'd be in the office and all the stuff away from everything and everybody except for the computer, then back into the traffic jam. Suddenly, people are working from home, the home office, they're surrounded by a whole different thing. And so this thought of, what is it I really value? Do I really want the higher income and going up the ladder kind of thing, get promotions? Or is this what I want, what I got now? So a lot of that thing's been going on, I think. And one of the things when people do this, have been working at home, they look out the window and they think, what the hell's that lawn doing there? Why do I need that lawn? What's it there for? So I think since the COVID hit us in the early 2020, it seems many people have been digging up their lawns. And they've been creating on the side, they've been getting out, and they've actually turned from this to something like this, permaculture lawn. And there's been a lot of that going on in the last couple of years, which is absolutely fantastic. And I think more people are saying, I want to grow more vegetables. So that's what they've been doing. And this one is a delightful illustration, sort of plan on permaculture. And that comes from, this is terrible how I got brain fog on the name. Druid's Garden, anyway. Dana of Druid's Garden. Look out, search her on Facebook or even on Google, Dana of Druid's Garden, and that's a plan that came from her. She's been a guest, and I've invited her to be a guest in the series, but I haven't heard back from her yet. But anyway, that's an idea. People want to grow more veggies. But I don't really know. You know, people thought, wow, I want to grow the veggies. The other thought is, well, how do I go about doing it? Because they haven't had that kind of apprenticeship. They probably haven't had that upbringing. So they've gone onto YouTube. A lot of people have gone onto YouTube to find out how to make that garden. And I think I might put a garden in my background here to kind of focus on the point. I do have a virtual background of gardens, I think, and that will get us in groove of things. Actually, this is not gardens as such. This is some volunteers in the garden. So there we go. Because volunteers I'm going to talk about in a moment. So we'll get on to that. Anyway, people are searching the YouTube channels for growing channels. And there's been amazing increase. Loads of gardening channels have suddenly appeared on YouTube in the last 2 years. And some of those channels, they're excellent. But what happens is people get so busy making these YouTube videos about how wonderful their garden is and how wonderful your garden is. And they get focused on making the video, distributing the video. You know what happens? They end up not having time to work their gardens. So this is where the volunteers come in. So they try hard to get some volunteers in to do it for them. So it's like the scribes, isn't it? Here we go. I'm going to hide me, and there's the volunteers, full picture. And so that's what happens to the YouTube channel makers. And sometimes they actually dare to call this apprenticeship. This is actually a pretty good apprenticeship, but this is the sort of thing when they get volunteers, they'll say, well, I've made a garden, I put some YouTube stuff up, people can come and learn hands-on, and they're apprentices, and they get my garden done at the same time. And some of these bold people actually charge people to work their gardens, not just as volunteers. Some people have got it, they got such huge following on YouTube, they think that they're now in the elite, that they can charge you for the privilege of stepping onto their garden and working it for them. And they call it sacred learning, of course. And sometimes what is offered, as I showed on the list before, is actual very good and genuine apprenticeship. Also, the sales of gardening, if people don't go into YouTube, a lot of people like to expand their libraries. They love books. They don't want to watch a video. They love the smell and opening up of the book and seeing the photographs. So gardening book sales have really soared as well. And so gardening courses, Zoom's become popular. So gardening courses on Zoom is huge. And there's an exception one, actually, and she's going to be our guest next week. One of our guests is Joanne Lindsay Butler of Organic Gardens in Donegal. That's a poster of a course that she does, I think, through Zoom. And as I say, Joan's going to be with us next Sunday, which is an absolute delight. And she's one of the good ones. But sometimes gardeners, like YouTubers, they've had to decide between giving Zoom courses or forget it and just carry on with the gardens. And Joanne's actually been in that situation herself. You know, how do you juggle it all? Because she's got a young family. The family want to go out on days out as well, and they want to go on a holiday. So you're juggling between the family, presenting all of the Zooms and the courses online because it gets a bit of income in to pay for the family. Yeah, you still got the garden to do. It's pretty awkward once you get big with it. But I think the overall attitude of this new COVID generation, a lot of people have looked at their lawns. I'll show that lawn again. They've looked at this and they say, I want veggies. Let's have a go at it. And that's what they do. People have had the attitude of let's have a go. And that is the right attitude. I like that. You know, don't try and plan it and do the spreadsheets. Just get those hands in the soil. Get yourself some seeds, get yourself some plants. One of the things people were doing is like what we had. We had a wonderful warm week last week, and people think, the summer's here. They go out and get the seeds and plants, get them into the garden, and then we've had a few days of frost. They're killed. But what do? You learn by that, don't you? You realize, well, I'm not going to do that next year. But at the same time, some people are advising, wait till May. Even the garden shops will tell you that. The garden centres will say, have you got a greenhouse? Have you got a polytunnel? Or shouldn't put those out until May. So they're pretty good. They don't try and sell you things for the sake of selling things. But it's all about having a go at it. And the first couple of years, things are not going to work. But it's the having a go that is, to me, the perfect attitude. Never be concerned about your yields and trying to map out what your potential yields are going to do. This isn't about profit. Even with your garden, it's not about your yield. It's actually putting your spirit into it. And that's why I feel that's what we've got to get started with. And I think a lot of people have had the courage to do that, especially over the last couple of years. So you don't worry about supplies and equipment. You don't say, I haven't got the equipment to do this. I can't do this. I can't do the garden. I haven't got the right tools. You just use what's around you, and neighbors will lend stuff to you that they're not using. You just get creative with what's around you, what you have access to. But the local garden suppliers, they've loosened up as well. They make it easier to order online, and the home delivery is really improved, I find. Couriers are couriers before COVID were a pain. They always said they don't know your address and can you come to the depot to get stuff. I hope this has been with you. I find the couriers have been really helpful since the COVID. They actually have become people of service. Very good deliveries. They've learned how to use air codes, postcodes, and zip codes. They use the Google Maps as well on their phones. So they really got their own craft sorted out. Couriers, I feel, have become couriers. They deliver also with a lot more courtesy as well as efficiency. Very fast deliveries. Wonderful that they've made this great change. Now, I find that new small growers are actually, a lot of them are producing decent yields quite quickly. And what they do then, if you've got too much food, what do? You network your excess. Look what I've done. And so you start giving the stuff away. You network your excess, family, neighbors, and you distribute fairly, of course. Now, local plant I'm getting tongue-tied already. Local plant growers, I think they've been very great, very good. People that have the polytunnels locally, and we've got that here, that they've been taking orders from these new gardeners. What would you like us to grow? So they plant the seeds, they get your plants growing. So in May, you can go to these plant growers and their polytunnels, get your plants, put them into your garden. You don't have to worry about the seeding and all that nonsense, unless you really want to. But I think for a beginner, it's lovely to have these local plant people who will do it for you, and they'll take your individual orders. And it's a fantastic networking local system where you're actually interacting with each other. So think about that one. If you've got local plant growers, work with them. And this all, you've dug up your lawn, you've got the food going, you might have excesses. What does this do? with the help of your local plant people, it all helps to keep the locals fed. Everyone's looking after each other to make sure people are being fed, they're healthy from local food. And this is all done within a decent spending budget. Excuse me. And it's building up gradually a wonderful social local economy that's not based on spreadsheets, planning, profits, blah, blah, blah. It's just organically happening amongst us. And it's very difficult to explain because it's not really the sort of things you can put into words. And what's happening here is really we're coming to the subject now. This is all about becoming active in your local food sovereignty. Now, one thing people have done, they've find that they're actually teaming up their food sovereignty with their body sovereignty, and they're being much more cautious over what is going into their bodies. You know, if you're in a town office, anything can do because you've got 10 minutes, go out, get something to eat, wolf it down. Now, if you're at home and you're in your garden, there's a greater attention to yourself, I believe. Anyway, I've waffled a while and you've made some comments. Let's see what is being said here. Loads of comments. And that's, where do we finish off here? We had Puddle Pipes, but Little Wing was around as well. Oh my goodness. And then Sherry, hi Fiona, welcome. There must be a Fiona somewhere. And Puddle Pipes was back in. Thanks, Sherry. Fiona, Puddle Pipes is Fiona. Now we got that mystery solved. Fantastic. Sherry, love the video on many levels there. And Shannon Michael Dory Smith is thanking you for that. And Claire is on board. Good afternoon to Claire. And Kate is here. Kate Cloud Sparks from Rural Permaculture Gardens and her goats there, which is fabulous. Preaching to the converted there, probably to a lot of people. Wonderful video. Hope enough people meet the deadline. And Little Wing, they say youth is wasted on the young. Andrew Rosewood, good morning from Florida. Corey Bell is here from Sapaloosa, Oklahoma. And it looks like Little Wing might know. Greetings, Corey. That's very nice of you. And hello, Little Wing back. Hope you're doing well. And let's see, practice something is the key of growing. The magic ingredients are love and belief. That sort of puts my last 20 minutes of chatting into half a dozen words. Absolutely brilliant. And not being afraid of getting one's hands dirty. Wonderful addition. And Sherry's got something to say here. Speaking of surviving without profit, my grandparents lived deep in the mountains in West Virginia, coal mining area. No one had money. One neighbor had a horse, and in spring he would bring his horse and plow at each of their gardens in exchange for food and harvest time. That was a thing. That's a real ancient tradition. It's lovely to read of that because there was a tradition here of the ploughboys that would dress up like the mummers and the folk drama people, and they would combine the folk drama and go door to door with people's gardens. But of course, they became bullies in the end, and if you don't give us money, we'll plough up your garden anyway and all your flowers. But yeah, it's a lovely tradition that the plough people used to do, and it's good to read that some people still do that. Brought my babies in for the weekend. That must be the plants from Little Wing. And my name for Fiona too. So we got that. And then community, all hands on deck. Okay, I'll carry on with this. As we can see here, food sovereignty is a lovely alignment of people, especially local people, and what people do to grow, distribute, and consume together. And you got little plant organizations. We have the Knock Vicar Community Garden. Here they have rows of polytunnels, and they are great because they host seed swaps and plant swaps. But what these seed swaps and plant swaps become, that's in the background. You know, that's hardly anything to do with the event. It's the people coming together and catching up with chat about their gardens, what they got to offer, and there's bartering that goes on, but it's really the spirit of exchange and community, and that's what goes on. And I know a lot of rural places have got into this, and of course during the COVID time, yeah, those swapping meetups weren't happening. So it was really all hands on deck and whatever you could communicate on your Zoom and online. But this year, despite there is COVID around, but it's regarded as not so serious, people are communicating and getting around with each other with small groups. And I think that's the difference. If you're with small groups, you're at much less risk, I think, than if you were in large festival style groups. So it all starts with ourselves and family being responsible. Let's bring up a picture to explain that. Here we go, family in the garden. So this is where it starts, all being responsible for growing some of our own food at least. And on whatever land we have around us, or the bit of land we can get access to if we don't have a garden. Now, people in apartments, and there's more and more of this been going on, the balcony gardens, the lovely balcony gardens that people have been doing, using pots and bins like this. Even they are growing some food. And I've seen some lovely examples. Well, this is potatoes and tomatoes in a pot. I've seen lovely examples of growing potatoes in hessian and cotton shopping bags and putting them on the balcony. That's lovely because they just grow them in the bag on the balcony. When they're ready for potatoes, they just pull them in the kitchen, take the potatoes out. It's a lovely way to go about it, and you're getting some food together. And some urban people, they're actually doing the naughty and squatting unused land, usually public land, or some of the ghost houses that have been empty since the recession. They're still empty. We're getting on 10, 15 years, isn't it now? So they're just going in there, planting the veggies and the fruit. And then when it comes up, it's kind of a pay forward situation. So the people that plant it are not necessarily the people that harvest this. It's growing food without possessiveness, really. And as I say, it's kind of a community pay forward situation that people go in, they plant the stuff where they've squatted on this unused land. And then when the stuff's ready to harvest, of course, the people who planted is going to go back to get the food. But it's open to the public. It's open to anybody. So that's a lovely kind of loosened up food sovereignty situation. And someone might go in there and put in their radishes and carrots. They're easy to grow, spinach, fast growing things, and then someone else comes and harvests them later on. They're still part of the community, and for whatever you know, the people that came on and did the harvesting, they may be making a meal that's eaten by the people who did the planting. And that's the lovely sort of organic interaction that happens when this sort of thing really gets going. The most important thing is whatever's grown, it's eaten. It's not wasted. And that's another big food sovereignty thing. And I talked about veggies, fruit's good. Strawberries grow easily. Raspberry canes, they're very good. Even black currants, they really scatter really nice. So this land squatting is a bit of boldness, I know. But you get public veggies. Here's an example. There's this woman on a public bit of land. She's helped out with a bit of gardening, and someone's going to come along and get some of that food. So that's something, if the balconies are too small, that's something apartment people can well and truly do and get involved in. So whether we got land at home or we've got access, whatever land we got access to, the food growing, it starts with us and includes our families, neighbors, expands into our communities, and we're all organically connecting to try and make sure we got good, local, wholesome food. That by doing it ourselves, it fits in our budget. And also with unused land squatting, if it does seem to be community action and community service and people are not vandalizing, the one thing that seems to be very common is the police leave everybody alone, especially here where there isn't hardly any guard or any way to do anything. I was talking to Sarah Humble last week. She was saying that she actually went to the Navan police saying, look, We're going to be doing this protesting. We're going to also do some planting. And the police more or less said, we don't care. We haven't got the manpower to even look at what you're doing. So as long as there's no vandalism and it's being responsible, being community, it's all about taking back our own food responsibilities and taking back the connections that perhaps we have been disrupted from, these natural and social and local growing connections. So what we'll really do, and it's been happening, as I say, with the COVID and even with urban lifestyles, a lot of people have been drifting back into what we can call, with a buzz phrase, local food sovereignty. And really, this is what humans have done for thousands of years, since ancient times. And it's only in the last couple of hundred years that people have been carrying currency. Most people up to 200 years ago didn't have currency in their pocket. It was all about barter and people helping them to survive. So we've only had money in our pocket maybe for 200 years or so. And I suppose today with digital finance, the money's back out of our pocket. We don't have money in our pocket because we're using cards and Apple Pay and stuff like that. So there is a lot of concern now that we're losing connection with our currency. People saying, what's happened to being able to spend with notes and coins? But as I say, a couple of hundred years ago, there we go. There's a bartering market here in India. And this is the way people survived since ancient times. This is a current bartering market, but this is how it was done in local areas before people had money in their pocket. They bring something to the marketeers that they might want, and the marketeers say, well, this is worth this, this, and this. Let's have a swap. Just like I was saying, the local nursery here at Vicar does a seed swap, plant swap, and that sometimes extends into other swaps as well. And unfortunately, it is a dirty word today, but I must point this out, that the Russians actually have been very good at this and they've continued this. They're very much into the food sovereignty there in the Russian agriculture. A lot of food there comes through community farms, same in Ukraine. But of course, that's hugely disrupted, very painful. So I don't want to talk too much about that. But making making comparison, because I got a picture here of, this is a USA corporate farm. Sorry. Oh, I've lost the voice. Let's get it back again. And of course, that's very different to the food sovereignty that I'm talking about. Let's think of that. Let's go. Here's a picture of Aztec farms. The Aztecs, ever since ancient times, have been continuing food sovereignty, and it's all about local growing economics, and that's what they've sustained. And they barter outside their own communities. The whole thing, even with food sovereignty, food security is saying produce mass food so there's world food, get rid of food hunger. But if you do this wise locally, everybody is actually contacting people to make sure nobody goes without. When you're on a food security system, you're hoping that the computer statistics will feed everybody. Big difference. Anyway, excuse me, there was a big change really when the Spanish came. They arrived in South America. They set up these sort of castles, the haciendas, and that had quite an impact on the community farming in South America, and they've never really forgotten about that, because when the haciendas arrived, suddenly the concept of profit had arrived. Also, the concept of getting the food away from the local people and exporting it, and doing that to excess, because the export and the excess of that was where the bigger profits came. So it was all changed there in South America. But now in South America, fortunately, that's all changing again. We do hear a lot about the destruction of the Amazon rainforests and the problems with that. But South America's got another side of it. And food sovereignty has become very politicized there. And There's actually websites popping up telling you how to do food sovereignty, of course. And there's a lot of political season jargon that's come into these websites about food sovereignty. And the one that gets me is when a bunch of people come together and on a political platform with food sovereignty, suddenly they're known as comrades, that sort of thing. Yeah, that's not really shaking hands with your neighbor. Comrades. Sorry, that's a personal irritation. But let's go to Ecuador. Here we go. There's some Ecuador people. They've really sorted this out fantastically. They've done this very well. And their community growing. There's a cartoon from Ecuador. There you go. You got the corporate farmers on the right. You got the Ecuadorian food sovereignty people on the left there. And fortunately, the food sovereignty people have actually become recognized at state level. So they've sort of won the game there, which is fantastic. And apparently the government's given them a lot of encouragement and support. And this is a harvest. This is a corn harvest. And this has gone into old rituals, ancient rituals of blessing the harvest. And that's a photo from that. And this will be attended by government people. You know, this has really come back. The local ritual and the spirituality and the folklore is all come together in Ecuador. Isn't that an example that'd be lovely to follow everywhere? And nobody's going to go hungry there. I don't think anybody's going to get hungry. Yeah, you're going to get localized weather conditions, climate change, blah, blah, blah. But I do believe a good sovereignty network will cause a balance. Though I know there's been famines in the past, but I think because of we will use the digital link-ups as a first aid if there is a problem. But I think don't replace your local sovereignty with the digital alternative. That's really the thing you go to when things get really hard, and people will support and help in their very organic way. So Ecuador is very unique. Because we know around the world that governments and corporations they're kind of linked up with the regimes, and that includes the corporate farms as well. So food policies on a government level is in the food security realm, and that's greatly favored over going into localized food sovereignty. I suppose food security seems easier. It's a lazier approach. You know, you can't command local food sovereignty, and when governments can't command people, they get nervous, don't they? They get fearful. They want a centralized controlling system, and when we're going off doing our own thing, and people are healthy and they're thinking, governments don't like that. You can't control people when they're healthy and they're thinking and they're educated. It makes the government obsolete in a way. Bolivia is another example. They were very impressed with the Ecuador food sovereignty example, and they started encouraging and supporting this too. I think I've got a Bolivia photograph here. Is a Bolivia banner, and this is interesting. Look at that, March the 8th. I'm going to talk about this in a minute, but what they are combined there is a national or an international Food Sovereignty Day, and they combined it with an International Women's Working Day. That came together on March the 8th. But Ecuador and Bolivia, these countries were also, as well as establishing food sovereignty. Remember earlier at the start with the Save the Boyne, I was talking about rivers and lakes having rights that are equal to people. So Ecuador and Bolivia, to align with the food sovereignty, have also aligned into their constitution, I believe, the rivers and lakes now have the rights that are equal to people. So that means the rivers can actually have a place in courts, the same as a human person. And this is very vital when people threat pollution to the rivers, and such as what's happening in the Save the Boyne. There's a meat processing company. I might talk about this later, but there's a meat processing company called Dawn Meats, and they process beef for export, and they're about to pollute the Boyne River. So this is what this is to protect. Give the rivers a personality as a person, same rights. They can come into court, and the rivers with their solicitors, their lawyers, can fight for their rights to not be polluted. So that's what that's all about. And that's what these South American countries are doing. Venezuela, of all places, they've moved into food sovereignty and rivers rights, and that's a country that's had a lot of problems recently. And then we can go into Africa, Mali, Senegal. Nepal is onto it. I know that's not Africa, but they're onto the food sovereignty as well. And the other countries seriously discussing it. I'm surprised Bhutan isn't in that list, but I'm sure they'll get into it. But I talked about the Sovereignty Day. This was it last year. It was on the 17th of April. And so they decided to make it 8th of March this year. And now another, going back into ancient times, the Huron people of Canada, north traditional people north of Lake Ontario, Indigenous people there, they've had a heritage of food sovereignty right through. And what's interesting about them is that food sovereignty in their tribes is kind of guided by councils, and those councils that oversee the food sovereignty are formed by women. And this is due to the tribal belief that women have a closer connection to the land, and the land itself is the realm of women. And one of the things I'm going to be talking about next week is that whole yin-yang thing I often bring about, is what's going on under the ground in the womb of the earth. So there's that connection that they see amongst the Huron people. And these councils, the women of these councils were regarded as being conductors to the food growing cycles every year. And through these councils, every food sovereignty decision is focused on and has a joint council decision. And what they consider is, with everything, is what impact on the land will growing crops and rearing animals have? If they change a policy or an approach, what impact on the land is that going to have? That's what the councils are there for. So from their wisdom and policies and methods of sustaining farming and establishing permaculture, that's what this is about. And I like this. This is the pillars of food sovereignty. I'll give you a moment to read that one. Well, I get more water down me. So that's kind of a nice sum up of what food sovereignty is about. And I think it's a beautiful thing to pursue it as much as anybody is able to. Okay. Now, let's see. Comments, I think. Let's have a look at your comments, see what you're saying. A few more comments here and a few things popping up on the screen that I shouldn't have. There we go. Right, comments here. Where we go. There's a bunch here. All hands on deck. And there we go. No, the comments are not coming up. There we go. Little silver cloud lining is the lockdowns brought people together. Says Little Wing, and she's enjoying this. That's going on. And actually says someone kind man. There you go. And there's Alex has appeared. Good afternoon, beautiful people, says Alex from Florida. Fiona says hello, Fiona. Thought that was Florida. Greeting Transylvania, Romania. Alex is in from there. Thank you for being with us, Alex. How's the food sovereignty in Romania? It's a very ripe country for that. I hope that's going well, because I know from the Romanians living in Ireland that I've got to know, it's one of the things they talked about quite a bit, and in some ways they miss it. So thanks for being on board with us, Alex. That's great. Okay, that's the comments for now. So I suppose I've now run out of pictures, I think, except for telling you what's coming up next week. Let's see what I've got here. I didn't have time to put all the pictures up, and there's one thing I'll show here. The one thing about the Save the Boy that I've been putting up with, one of the things that concerns me is like when there was the motorway being put through Tara. There were protesters from all over the world and all over Ireland, but where were the protesters not coming from, but from Meath itself? And then there was an event, Save the Tara, which was an event where they didn't have drones in those days, so they had to have aerial photographs. So everybody dressed in white, and they spelled out in their white suits, 2,000 or 3,000 people, save the tower and the big Irish harp as well. And a lot of Meath people thought, what a lovely thing to do on a Sunday afternoon. So all these Meath people got involved. This was the first time they had got involved in the campaign. But unfortunately, it was so late in the game and they thought, oh, we didn't realize this was going on. Oh, if we'd known, we would have supported it. And if those Meath people had been involved at an earlier stage, then I don't think the motorway would have, well, they would have had a lot of difficulty going ahead. There was other alternatives like opening up the railway line, widening the road there already was. And I think that's unfortunately the Dawn Mead situation, which is they want to put a lot more of their runoff from the slaughtering of beef that they're making for export. They just want to throw that through a pipeline into the Boyne, and that's really going to upset the balance of the Boyne. That's what the issue is here. But I don't want to go into politics of that this time. I want to go into the whole vision of how can we protect the water? How can we bring that into our permaculture living? Because the water is so important. And even last week, I talked about the riparian barriers where you have the wilderness in between the water and the farming. So I'm going to go a bit into the foods. Oh, yeah, the one thing I was talking about. One thing the campaign for the Save the Boyne hasn't done, it's done the same thing. People from all around the world, they're so engrossed in the folklore of the Boyne, the mythology people, they've all come together complaining, but very few of them live in Meath. And the one thing I think they failed to do in Meath is have something for the Meath people to get their hands into and realize what's going on. But there's one group of Meath people, is these annoyed fishermen. I showed this last week. These fishermen, very annoyed. What could they have done? You know, it's amazing to expand that, to let the whole of Meath know what's going on. Come on, we want to keep our river clean for all sorts of reasons. So I was just bringing that. Anyway, a chat of food security. Sorry, I've run out photos for this. I didn't have time to put them on. But this is how it's thought most of the Earth's population is fed. It probably is. But for a start, I feel with food security, there's a lot of passing the buck goes on with this. There's not enough thought and attention applied to the land care and preservation. You saw all those tractors in a massive field that I showed earlier. And certainly not enough thought about the protection of water, as I was talking about with the Boyne campaign. That's an active example of what happens when we're dealing with food security. Dawn Meat's processor of products is a very successful food company, and it's a great success when looked at in food security terms. But there's a lot of dangerous passing of the buck going on in that situation. And the passing of the buck is what's happening with, well, what do we do with all this waste? We'll just throw it in the river. So they're just throwing it into the Sacred Heritage River on top of the very suspect food processing methods. And it's all passing the buck, I think, because it's such a big operation. And this is, I'm just talking about Boyne Meats and what they're doing in a little Meath situation. But to me, this is an issue that's not only nationwide in Ireland, it's a similar issues going on all over the world where the passing of the buck is happening with food security. So with food security, I don't think we've established earth security with that. Maybe there's a way of looking at it. So bringing this back home, it seems that the COVID time was a time that people seriously looked at their gardens and suddenly thinking, wow, this is actually precious what I got here. Why do I have to have this useless lawn? So with some people, their gardens changed, as I say, from the value of having to put up with lawn mowing drudgery, and they built up this new, you might say, spiritual faith, their new belief. Even their lawn becomes their new church. Gets filled with veggies, fruits, herbs, maybe a few other trees, and maybe a pond for wildlife, which is a lovely thing to do. And of course, flowers for bees and pollination, and flowers for joy, personal joy, of course. Now, to me, food sovereignty does not start with a political style agenda policy. And it doesn't start with trying to perfect your plans with a spreadsheet and doing all these fancy graphic plans. These are things that can happen later. To me, food sovereignty, it's all about starting and continuing the passion for the bit of land that you have access to, and especially how it is watered, because if that piece of land isn't watered, there's not going to be any yields anyway. So this is where the water comes into it and is integrated. And your yields are crafted through your understanding of that land and that water. So playing passionate responsibility to our surroundings and garden, the birds start returning, wildlife returns, and it's not just a human community that happens, it's this integration, this biodiversity community that also comes together and expands. And I find that, just thinking about that, it's an incredibly beautiful thing. So with more thoughts about the food security way in comparison to that biodiverse way, Ireland is actually a very good example of food security success, because Ireland is very well known for its famine years of 1845 to 49. And now Ireland, with its population of 4.5 million, fast increasing to 5 million, it now produces enough food for over 35 million people. And the goal is to actually make the country produce food for over 50 million people within the next 8 to 9 years. However, that's not all great news, because with all that food, that obviously Ireland is exporting a lot of food, but Ireland's also importing a lot of food. Doesn't that sound crazy to you? Why is this happening? And this might be happening in other countries too. Why are we importing food that we could grow ourselves? Some say it's to firm up trade-up deals with other countries to maintain peace with other countries. And so a lot of the exporting may be a handshake. Obviously, people are making money with this, but it's a handshake, they say, for peace. But one of the reasons that concerns me is that in Ireland, with all this exporting of food, it's mainly cattle and animals, and less land. The land being used to grow veggies, commercially, veggies, fruits, cereals, it's getting less and less. In fact, I think Ireland is now down to about only 4% of the agricultural land in Ireland is now used for actually growing vegetables, cereals, and fruits. The rest of it's for animals. And I find that's absolutely ridiculous, because Ireland's not all bog and rock. You know, you get the impression from the tourist photographs, it's all bog and rock here, and that's all Ireland lives. No, there's amazing soil here, especially if you go to Meath, you go to Monaghan, go down into Tipperary, Cork, Waterford, Wexford, beautiful, even Offaly, beautiful sort of high quality, dark, rich soil. But there's cows on it, and there's cows grazing, and then lots of fields used to create food for the winter for the cows. So very little human food is actually grown in Ireland. So there's a lot of potential crop raising land here. So does that mean Ireland trades its industrial food to get other supplies? Well, apparently that's what this country does. And that's what many countries do. And as I say, they believe it's to encourage peace. And that's peace on the government levels. And I suppose if there's peace on government levels, that feeds down, and we're allowed to live in peace, we live in security, and that's what food security is part of. But what happens with food security is most people have detached from being part of the food. And I think that's dangerous. I think food security seems to be a policy that has encouraged the people of nations to surrender their crafts that they bring back into food security and the apprenticeship of it. So this is what's detached us from the land. It's detached us from the water. So when there's passing the buck by these food security companies, we don't know what's going on because we're so detached from it. So the rivers can be polluted, and the only way we'll probably recognize that is if we're drinking water from the river. Suddenly the community goes sick and we're all in hospital. it's a bit too late then, isn't it? And this is where I think you weigh up the food security with the food sovereignty. And only our sovereignty of this is in our votes. You know, politicians are voted in if it's a democracy. So we do have a vote, and I feel that a vote, the one thing our vote will do is enhance the career of a politician. But I think all political candidates, I always think when there's an election, there's all these candidates and they're fighting for a salary. They want to get a salary, an easy salary from the public income tax coffers. And some people even describe elections as being a race to see who can get into the public treasury trough first. Yeah, the public treasury trough. That's what they call it. So it's all this race. Who's going to get into that trough? So how can we compete with food security, with food sovereignty, when the food security is part of the politicians' work and they're desperate to get into that public expenditure, public collection trough? And especially when I think back to my approach to a child. One thing as a child, I absolutely loved my little bit of land. I grew radishes, spinach and carrots. Very easy to do. Very easy for anyone to do if they haven't been growing stuff. Great start. So I hope something somewhere, and what I've said today, has encouraged you more in food security. Right now, the food sovereignty, and right now the food sovereignty movement in Ireland and in most places around the world is very much back into baby steps. But I think each year we learn a bit more from our own food growing, us in a small way. And sometimes it goes so well with us, we get an opportunity to have a bit more land to expand with, maybe from a local farmer. We had a couple of guests last year on this subject, Kate Burrows there with the Happy Jacks, and Sue McMillan with the Bala Farm Shop. I mean, this is where they started growing in a small scale. Boom, it worked for them, so they could set up sharing with the community, and they got bits of land. But some people who started their food sovereignty passion in their gardens, they end up being so successful, they sell up and buy a small farm with a bit more land. And this has happened with a young family near here, Dromanilla. They went onto a farm, they got pretty reasonable, realized they loved their gardens, realized they were pretty good on the farm, had an excess. What do? They've expanded into they've got 3 retail dining outlets just about open. Now that the COVID restrictions out of the way, they've got one open in Carrick and Shannon. I think the Strand Hill is going to open soon. Then there's going to be another one in Boyle. So that is the extreme. It's like another version of the 100th monkey effect, isn't it? And that's what can happen with these food sovereignty larks. So starting with our home garden, it's all baby steps towards food sovereignty, and it becomes one way or another a local way of life, and it integrates your respect for water as well. When this happens, local politicians, they've got to take notice. They've got to take notice if they want your vote and if they want to keep their heads in that public trough. So when these politicians do cop on to what's happening with food sovereignty, could Ireland end up being like Ecuador, Bolivia, Senegal, I mentioned, Nepal is going that way, and suddenly we've got national food sovereignty policies supported by the government, and for the water as well. And the rights of sacred water resources, absolutely brilliant. Anyway, I think before I finish off here and tell you what's coming up, I think I've been on blabbing for a long time. It's a reminder why I've changed the name of the Sunday broadcast, because it was this time last year I changed from Sunday sessions to Nature Folklore was the name. And so while this afternoon I've been talking about something practical rather than highly spiritual folklore, to me, much of this year, or much of the year, is about connecting the folklore into the care of land and water and the trees through a sovereignty approach. And below the ground, where all the action happens and where the seeds are giving birth to plants, and the roots are hunting underground for food to feed the plants that becomes our food. Soil is precious, isn't it? And perhaps soil is the most highly spiritual realm that we have on earth. It is. It covers the earth. And along with the water as well. Let's equal the water with the soil, because nothing will work without the water. But as you know, in the soil and below is the place where the devil lives. And all those tales of serpents of life and dragons waiting to fly out. And it's where the fairies and she live too, isn't it? And all these characters and images of a folklore that should really inspire us with love and respect for what is there, and not be afraid of it like these devil stories and the dragons and the serpents. Feel the love in that soul. And our sovereignty is very sound when we believe, when we sustain our love of these entities of life that we turn into stories and our hands-on actions that become food sovereignty. And so if we live with that image of what's going on below the ground, on what's coming up from the ground through our water, our trees, on all the food that we're eating and what other wildlife is eating, put that along with our love and our extreme gratitude and our pride as well. So really, I think that's all I've got to say on food sovereignty. And now, let me talk about how we'll carry on this intimate series of permaculture living. Well, actually, let's catch up with some your voices, because there's quite a few voices and comments with all me blabbing on here. And we last left Alex here from Transylvania, which was a delay. Oh, we got Sable here. Strixnik Tia, sorry if I've got that wrong. If you're in the, I recommend Baker Creek Heirloom Seed Company. There you go. Wonderful reference there. They aren't just about local food sovereignty. They're about doing so with traditional and non-GMO seeds and plants. So essential around the USA. And I'm sure you've got other places too. But thank you. Thank you for that comment. Very useful, Sable. Lovely. And I was asking Alex what's going on in Romania. Food enough there, just have enough money to pay for. And that's a motivation to get going with what you can. And I'm sure Romania's got a very fertile, from what I understand. Not been there, wish I had, because there's a lot of culture and folklore in Romania that's fascinating and understated. A lot that can be learned from there. Okay, Sable, Corrie, you're not too far from here in the River Valley. I have some family that lived in Sepulchre years ago. Lovely that you've made the connection. Fantastic. Alex, hello again. Getting very chatty, which is wonderful. It's partly what this is about. We're getting very sharing of sovereignty and community here today. Lovely. Look at this. Hello, Fiona from Alex here. How are you today? We've got from Little Wing and Staffin. Fox Griswold's with us. Fantastic. Been planning on adding raised beds for gardening in our front yard all winter. A nice reminder to keep at it. There you go. And all sorts of wonderful things happen. Once you've got those beds up, they last forever. I'm into that, John. I haven't needed a lawnmower for anything but mulching all the leaves from my many trees for years. It's all gardens and bees and livestock here. There you go. A weed eater just does the job. And well said. I used to like a tidy garden. Yeah, tidy. Once you get into food sovereignty, bye-bye to tidy gardens. A lot of the time, I think if you're tidying in the garden, something's going wrong. All right. Most of my permaculture friends are all in Ireland, Belton College, Mossy Bottom. I think Mossy Bottom is one example where I think I was sort of thinking about him. He's so busy making the YouTubes that he gets those volunteers to help. But he's got a great channel for all that. Great YouTubes on that. Interesting, Belton Cottage. She doesn't get the volunteers in. And way she's got around that, it seems that she's really expanded shrubs and trees. So she's gone more in the direction, I would say, of the rewilding, and a huge success on that. And of course, rewilding means that nature looks after it and carries on. And Claire's here. Thank you so much. Fascinating broadcast. Thank you, Claire. So let's tell you what's coming up. We've got great stuff coming up to continue this. And as I mentioned at the start of the sessions, this is all made possible by you wonderful Patreon subscribers. And for people who don't like going through PayPal, and people have been using this a lot lately, go to buymeacoffee.com, Nature Folklore, and if you can throw in €1, $1, or a pound or two, it really helps keep this up. Thank you very much. You can do that on your card as well. And so what's coming up? Nature Folklore Sessions. Let's get some pictures up of what's coming up. Next week, we got guests. We got great guests as well. Let's get that banner out of the way so you can actually see the pictures. I hope you got that anyway. Right, we got Joanna Lindsay Butler, who's the founder of Organic Gardens. And there's Joanna, kind of in bit of her garden there. She's got a couple of interesting subjects to share with us. Seed saving and swapping, I know, is one of the things she's going to be talking about. I forget what the other one is, but it'd be very interesting. And I've been intrigued by poet Edward Durand. He founded Sligo Permablitz during the winter, and that's been hugely successful, helping people in permaculture. So he wasn't on today because they're doing a big Permablitz community session out in Mayo. And we'll also include a few poets very intimate to what we're covering next Sunday. Then we move to 17th of April, and that's Easter Sunday. That's going to be my annual resurrection, from resurrection to the three trees, which is the three strains of the bard, talking about bardism, but then bringing that into the folklore living realm as well. And for that, next week, we've got, it's the melancholy onto the joy and onto the dreaming. And we've got some super guests with that. This includes the return of B. Smith and Tony Cookson and a few other guests. And then on the 24th of April is part 2 of the Underworld, Living Biodiversity Underworld. And that brings the underworld, land and water together and how it manifests for us in permaculture living. And as I say in that Save the Boyne, we had a little bit of a poem by Siobhan Dupria, and I'm going to share the entire poem with you, and she's going to be live with us and talking about what she does. Amazing work. Siobhan will introduce us to Wild Irish retreats that her and a partner host, and with them, this is permaculture, like what we share on Nature Folklore, but it's done within an environment of the Irish language, the Gaelic language. But what they do is not to actually teach the Irish language, because it doesn't matter how much use, even if you just know a few words. It's all about integrating the language and the folklore of it into your permaculture. Very interesting what they do there. So we'll have Siobhan talking about that, have a poem and the Wild Irish Retreats and what that's all about. That's on the 24th. Anyway, there's a couple more. There's some more chatting going on here. Let's see. Alex is just doing a lot of different applauding here. Thank you very much, Alex. Lovely to have had you aboard. And thank you all for the beautiful, inspiring and call to action. This is the video there, the savetheboyne.com. Shall I just give one more spin of the banner there? There you go. And if you're watching this after the broadcast, please keep commenting. If you're watching the archive, and I do return to answer comments as well. So it just leaves me to ask you to enjoy a safe week full of wonder, with all those lovely inspirations, enchantments, and I think that's as much as I've got I can share with you. No more comments coming up. So until next Sunday, do play well, look after yourself, be well, and we'll see you again next Sunday. Thanks. Bye-bye. Bye.